Sarah Mitchell had always been careful about her secrets. Working as a physical therapist at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in downtown Chicago, she treated former soldiers who carried their own hidden wounds. Her gentle hands and calm voice had helped hundreds of veterans heal from injuries that went far deeper than broken bones or torn muscles. On a humid Tuesday morning in July, Sarah arrived at work wearing her usual scrubs and comfortable sneakers. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her friendly smile greeted the receptionist as she signed in for her shift. Nobody at the hospital knew about her past. To them, she was simply Sarah, the kind therapist who never asked too many questions and always knew exactly how to help. Her first patient of the day was Marcus Rodriguez, a former Marine who had lost his leg in an explosion overseas. Marcus had been coming to see Sarah for 3 months, and their sessions had become the highlight of his week. Unlike other therapists he had worked with, Sarah understood things without him having to explain. She knew which exercises would help and which ones would cause unnecessary pain. "How are we feeling today, Marcus?" Sarah asked as she helped him onto the treatment table. "Better than yesterday, worse than I hope to feel tomorrow," Marcus replied with a tired smile. It was his standard answer, but Sarah could see the real pain in his eyes. As they worked through his exercises, Marcus noticed something different about Sarah today. She seemed more alert, more aware of her surroundings than usual. Her eyes would dart toward the windows and doors every few minutes as if she was expecting someone or something. "Everything okay, Sarah?" Marcus asked during a break between exercises. "Of course," she replied quickly, but her smile felt forced. "Just a long morning already." What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah had received a phone call at 6 that morning. The voice on the other end had spoken just 4 words. "Phoenix needs immediate extraction." Then the line went dead. It was a code she hadn't heard in 5 years, a code from a life she thought she had left behind forever. Sarah had spent the last 5 years building a new identity. She had gone to school, earned her degree, and created a quiet life helping others heal. She had friends who knew her as the woman who rescued stray cats and volunteered at the local food bank on weekends. They had no idea that before becoming Sarah Mitchell, she had been Agent Phoenix, one of the most skilled operatives in a Black Ops unit that officially didn't exist. As she continued working with Marcus, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Who had called her? Why now? The unit had been disbanded years ago after a mission went wrong in Eastern Europe. Most of her former teammates were either dead or had disappeared into new lives, just like she had. After Marcus left, Sarah had a 30-minute break before her next patient. She walked to the hospital cafeteria and bought a cup of coffee, sitting at a table near the back where she could watch the entrance. The call this morning could mean only one thing. Someone from her old life was in trouble and they needed her help. Sarah thought about her team leader, Colonel James Crawford. Crawford had been like a father to her during her years in the unit. He had recruited her when she was just 22, fresh out of the Army and looking for a way to serve her country in ways that mattered. Under his guidance, she had learned languages, combat techniques, and infiltration methods that most people only saw in movies. But Crawford had made her promise something before the unit disbanded. If she ever received the Phoenix call, she was to ignore it. "Your war is over, Agent," he had told her. "Live the life you've earned." Yet here she was, 5 years later, unable to stop thinking about who might need her help. Her next patient was Elena Vasquez, an Army veteran who had been injured in a training accident. Elena was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and intense green eyes that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. As they worked together, Sarah noticed that Elena moved with the same controlled precision that came from military training. "You seem different today," Elena observed as Sarah guided her through a stretching routine. "Different how?" Sarah asked, more focused. "Like you're preparing for something." Elena's eyes met Sarah's in the mirror. "I know that look. I've worn it myself." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Was she that obvious? Had 5 years of civilian life made her careless about hiding her true nature? "I think you're reading too much into things," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice light. But Elena wasn't fooled. As a former intelligence analyst, she had been trained to read people, to notice the small details that others missed. She had noticed how Sarah always positioned herself with a clear view of exits, how she moved with the fluid grace of someone trained in hand-to-hand combat, and how her eyes never stopped scanning for potential threats. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Sarah worked with 4 more patients, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about the code phrase and what it might mean. Phoenix had been her call sign because she had a talent for rising from impossible situations, for finding ways to complete missions when everything had gone wrong. During her lunch break, Sarah walked to a small park across from the hospital. She sat on a bench under an oak tree and pulled out her phone. She had memorized the number years ago but had never used it. It was supposed to be for emergencies only, a direct line to people who could provide help or information if her old life ever caught up with her. She dialed the number and waited. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered. "Flower shop." "I need roses for a Phoenix," Sarah said, using the code phrase. There was a long pause. "Phoenix has been dead for 5 years," the voice replied. "Sometimes things come back to life," Sarah said. Another pause, longer this time. "Meet me at the usual place in 2 hours." "Come alone?" And Sarah, "Yes? Be careful. There are people looking for Phoenix and they're not friends." The line went dead. Sarah sat on the bench for a few more minutes, watching people walk by. Office workers hurrying back from lunch, mothers pushing strollers, elderly couples holding hands. Normal people living normal lives, the kind of life she had worked so hard to build. But deep down, Sarah knew her peaceful existence was about to end. Someone from her past needed her, and despite Crawford's warnings, she couldn't ignore the call. Phoenix was about to rise again, whether she wanted it to or not. As she walked back to the hospital for her afternoon appointments, Sarah didn't notice the man in the gray suit who had been watching her from across the street. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Target confirmed," he said quietly. "Phoenix is still alive and she's been activated." Sarah finished her afternoon sessions with unusual efficiency. Her last patient noticed she seemed distant, but she explained it away as being tired from a long day. At exactly 5 o'clock, she clocked out and headed to her car in the hospital parking garage. The usual place was a small coffee shop called Grind Time in the Arts District, about 20 minutes from the hospital. It was where she used to meet her contact handler during her transition out of the Black Ops unit. The coffee shop was perfect for clandestine meetings, always busy, multiple exits, and the owner was a former CIA operative who understood the need for privacy. Sarah drove through the city streets, checking her rearview mirror regularly. Old habits died hard, and after this morning's phone call, she wasn't taking any chances. She noticed a blue sedan that seemed to be following the same route, staying about 3 cars behind her. When she turned left at the next intersection, the sedan continued straight. Maybe she was being paranoid, but paranoia had kept her alive for years. She parked 2 blocks away from the coffee shop and walked the rest of the way, taking an indirect route through a small shopping area. As she approached Grind Time, she saw her contact already sitting at a corner table near the back. The woman looked older than Sarah remembered, with gray streaks in her dark hair and new lines around her eyes. Agent Rebecca Torres had been Sarah's handler during her final year in the unit. Torres was one of the few people who knew all the details of why the Black Ops team had been disbanded, and why its members had been scattered to new lives with new identities. "You look good, Sarah," Torres said as Sarah sat down across from her. "Civilian life agrees with you." "Rebecca," Sarah nodded. "I wasn't sure you'd still be using this place." "Some things never change." Torres sipped her coffee. "Though many things have. We need to talk about why I called you." Sarah leaned forward. "I thought the unit was finished, done. You told me my service was complete." "It was. But something happened 3 days ago that changes everything." Torres pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. "Look at these photos, but keep your expression neutral. We're being watched." Sarah glanced at the tablet screen. The photos showed a woman's body lying face down on what appeared to be a warehouse floor. The woman had blonde hair and was wearing dark clothing. But what made Sarah's blood run cold was what she could see on the woman's exposed back. A small tattoo just below the left shoulder blade. It was a phoenix rising from flames, exactly like the one Sarah had hidden under her own clothing. "Who is she?" Sarah asked quietly. "Agent Raven. Jennifer Walsh. She was found dead in Prague 2 days ago." Torres took the tablet back. "The local police think it was a robbery gone wrong, but we know better." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Raven had been part of her unit, a skilled operative who specialized in infiltration and intelligence gathering. She was also the only other female agent in their small team. "How?" Sarah asked. "Single gunshot to the head, close range. Professional execution." Torres kept her voice low. "But here's what worries me. Whoever killed her knew about the tattoo. They positioned her body specifically to expose it, like they were sending a message. All members of their Black Ops unit had received the same tattoo during their training. It was supposed to be a symbol of unity, but it had become something more dangerous, a way to identify them even years after the unit disbanded. "Who else knows we're still alive?" Sarah asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out." 3 other former unit members have gone missing in the past month: David Chen in San Francisco, Miguel Santos in Miami, and Alex Thompson in Seattle. No bodies found, they just vanished. Sarah remembered each of them clearly. Chen had been their tech specialist, Santos handled explosives, and Thompson was their sniper. All highly trained, all capable of defending themselves. If someone was picking them off one by one, it meant they were dealing with professionals. "Why am I just hearing about this now?" Sarah asked. "Because we hoped it was coincidental, random bad luck. But Raven's death proves it's systematic. Someone is hunting down the remaining members of Operation Nightfall." Operation Nightfall had been their unit's final mission, the one that had gone catastrophically wrong and led to the unit's disbanding. Sarah had tried to forget the details, but they came flooding back now. They had been sent to infiltrate a arms-dealing network in Eastern Europe. The mission had seemed straightforward until they discovered the arms dealers were working with someone inside the U.S. government. "The files," Sarah said suddenly. Raven had copies of the mission files. Torres nodded grimly. "We think that's what they were after." But Raven was smart. She hid them well. And now they're coming for the rest of us because we might have copies too. Sarah understood the situation now. "How many of us are left?" 7, including you. Crawford is in hiding somewhere in Montana. Wilson is in witness protection after testifying in a completely unrelated case. Rodriguez is in a military hospital. He lost his legs in Afghanistan last year. Then there's you, me, and 2 others we've lost contact with. Sarah thought about Marcus Rodriguez, her patient at the hospital. Could it be the same Rodriguez? The timing would be right. He had lost his legs about a year ago, and he had the bearing of someone with special forces training. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something. Is Rodriguez's first name Marcus?" Torres looked surprised. "How did you know that?" "He's my patient at the VA hospital. I've been treating him for 3 months." Sarah felt pieces of a puzzle starting to fit together. "He doesn't know who I am, but I should have recognized him sooner." "That's not a coincidence, Sarah. Someone arranged for you 2 to be in the same place." Torres looked worried. "We need to assume your cover is blown." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If someone had deliberately placed her and Marcus in the same location, it meant they had been watching both of them for months. It also meant the enemy knew exactly where to find them. "What do you need from me?" Sarah asked. "We need you to help us find out who's behind this before they kill the rest of us, and we need you to help protect the others." Torres slid a small device across the table. "This is a secure communication device. If you agree to help, we'll reactivate your Phoenix clearance and provide backup." Sarah picked up the device, feeling its weight in her palm. It was smaller than a credit card but contained enough encrypted technology to communicate anywhere in the world. Accepting it would mean stepping back into a world she had worked so hard to leave behind. "What about my life here? My job, my patients? We'll protect your cover as much as possible. As far as anyone knows, you're just taking some vacation time. But Sarah, if we don't stop whoever is doing this, there won't be a life to go back to." Sarah thought about Marcus and her other patients who depended on her. She thought about her quiet apartment and her rescued cats. She thought about the peaceful life she had built over 5 years of careful construction. Then she thought about Raven lying dead in a Prague warehouse, and Chen, Santos, and Thompson who had simply vanished without a trace. "All right," she said, pocketing the communication device. "Phoenix is back in the game." Torres smiled for the first time since they had sat down. "Welcome back, Agent Phoenix. Your first assignment is to make contact with Marcus Rodriguez tonight. We need to warn him that his cover may be compromised too." As they left the coffee shop separately, Sarah didn't notice the man at the table near the window, who had been reading a newspaper throughout their entire conversation. He waited until both women were gone before making a phone call. "Phoenix has been reactivated," he said. "Proceed to phase 2. Sarah drove home through the evening traffic, her mind working through the problem like she had been trained to do years ago. She needed to contact Marcus Rodriguez. But she couldn't do it at the hospital where their conversation might be overheard or recorded. She also couldn't simply show up at his home without raising suspicions. Her apartment was on the third floor of a converted warehouse in a trendy neighborhood near downtown. It was perfect for her needs. Multiple exit routes, clear sight lines from the windows, and neighbors who minded their own business. As she climbed the stairs, she automatically checked for signs that someone had been in her apartment. The small piece of tape she always placed on her door was undisturbed, and the hair she left across the windowsill was still in place. Inside, her two rescue cats, Phoenix and Ashes, greeted her with their usual demands for attention and food. Sarah had named them after her old call sign, a private joke that no one else would understand. As she fed them, she tried to think of a natural way to contact Marcus outside of their normal therapy sessions. The secure communication device Torres had given her buzzed quietly. Sarah activated it and read the encrypted message. Rodriguez lives at 1247 Maple Street, apartment 4B. Recommend contact tonight. Time sensitive. Torres Sarah knew the area. It was about 15 minutes away near the university. She could drive by and assess the situation, maybe find a way to approach him that wouldn't seem suspicious. But first, she needed to prepare for the possibility that this was all a trap. She went to her bedroom and moved the dresser aside, revealing a small panel in the wall. Behind the panel was a waterproof case containing items from her old life: fake identification documents, cash in several currencies, and a Glock 19 pistol with 3 magazines of ammunition. Sarah had hoped she would never need these things again, but tonight felt different from any night in the past 5 years. She changed into dark jeans, running shoes, and a black jacket, clothing that would allow her to move quickly and blend into shadows if necessary. The pistol went into a shoulder holster under her jacket, and she slipped the fake ID and cash into her pockets. Before leaving, Sarah wrote a letter explaining everything to her supervisor at the hospital, sealed it in an envelope, and left it on her kitchen table. If something happened to her tonight, at least someone would know the truth about who she really was. The drive to Marcus's apartment took her through several neighborhoods that had changed dramatically since she first moved to Chicago. New restaurants and shops lined streets that had been empty lots 5 years ago. Sarah found herself wondering if she would live to see how the city continued to change. Marcus's building was a modest 3-story structure with apartments that housed mostly students and young professionals. Sarah parked across the street and observed the building for 20 minutes. The front entrance was well lit, and she could see people coming and going normally. No signs of surveillance or unusual activity. She was about to get out of her car when she noticed a van parked at the end of the block. The van was dark blue with tinted windows, and it had been in the same spot for the entire time she had been watching. Sarah made note of the license plate and decided to approach the building from the back alley instead. The alley behind Marcus's building was poorly lit and filled with dumpsters and fire escapes. Sarah moved quietly between the shadows, using skills she hadn't practiced in years, but that felt as natural as breathing. She found the fire escape for Marcus's building and began to climb. 4th floor, apartment B. Sarah counted windows until she found the right one. A warm glow came from inside, and she could see the silhouette of someone moving around. She tapped gently on the glass in a specific pattern: 3 short, 2 long, 3 short. It was Morse code for SOS, something any former military person would recognize. The movement inside stopped. After a moment, the curtain moved slightly, and Sarah could see Marcus's face peering out. His expression went through several emotions: surprise, confusion, and then recognition, followed by alarm. Marcus opened the window carefully. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing out there?" "We need to talk, Marcus, and not about your therapy." Sarah climbed through the window into his living room. "We're both in danger." Marcus closed the window and pulled the curtains shut. His apartment was spartanly furnished but clean and organized with military precision. Sarah noticed he moved more easily here than he did at the hospital, using his prosthetic legs with practiced efficiency. "You're not just a physical therapist, are you?" Marcus asked, settling into his wheelchair. "I've suspected for months. The way you move, the way you understand things without me explaining them." "Operation Nightfall," Sarah said simply. "I was Agent Phoenix." Marcus's eyes widened. "Phoenix? Jesus, Sarah, I heard Phoenix was a legend. They said you could get out of any situation, complete any mission. Those days are over. Or they were until this morning." Sarah sat down across from him. "Someone is killing off the team members, Marcus. Raven is dead and 3 others are missing." "Raven's dead?" Marcus looked stricken. "When? How?" 2 days ago in Prague. Professional execution. Sarah watched his reaction carefully. Marcus, I need to know, do you still have your copy of the mission files? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Which files specifically? The ones that showed who was feeding information to the arms dealers. The files that got our unit disbanded. Sarah leaned forward. The ones that proved someone in the U.S. government was involved in selling weapons to terrorist organizations. Those files were supposed to be destroyed, Marcus said carefully. But you kept copies. We all did, didn't we? Insurance policies in case someone tried to throw us under the bus. Sarah's voice was gentle but insistent. Marcus, whoever is hunting us down wants those files. They killed Raven to get hers and they'll kill us too. Marcus wheeled over to his bookshelf and pulled out what appeared to be an ordinary technical manual. He opened it to reveal that the pages had been hollowed out, creating a hiding space for a small external hard drive. Everything's on here, he said. Names, dates, bank transfers, recorded conversations. Enough evidence to bring down a dozen high-ranking officials. He handed the drive to Sarah. I always wondered when someone would come for it. Sarah looked at the small device in her hand. Such a tiny thing to have caused so much death and destruction. We need to get you somewhere safe, Marcus. They know where you live. How do you know that? Before Sarah could answer, they heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside Marcus's apartment. Multiple sets of footsteps moving with military precision. Sarah motioned for Marcus to be quiet and moved to the window to peer through the curtains. The blue van was now parked directly in front of the building, and she could see armed men in tactical gear entering through the front door. Someone had been watching the building, waiting for the right moment to move in. We need to go now, Sarah whispered urgently. How fast can you move? Fast enough, Marcus replied, transferring from his wheelchair to a lightweight racing chair that he kept near the door. There's a service elevator that goes down to the basement. We can get out through the building's connection to the subway tunnels. Sarah helped Marcus gather essential items while listening to the footsteps getting closer. The hard drive went into her jacket pocket, and Marcus grabbed a backpack that appeared to contain emergency supplies he had prepared for exactly this situation. They made it to the service elevator just as they heard the first door being kicked in somewhere above them. The elevator moved slowly, each floor seeming to take forever. Sarah had her pistol ready and Marcus had produced a gun of his own from his backpack. How many exits to the tunnels? Sarah asked. 3 that I know of, but if they're professionals, they'll have those covered too. Marcus's voice was calm despite the circumstances. We need to assume they know about our escape routes. The elevator reached the basement and they moved quickly through a maze of storage rooms and utility corridors. Behind them, they could hear radio chatter and the sound of tactical teams systematically searching the building. They reached a heavy door that Marcus unlocked with a key from his backpack. Beyond it was a maintenance tunnel that connected to the subway system. The tunnel was dark and smelled of metal and dampness, but it represented their only chance of escape. Marcus, Sarah said as they moved through the tunnel, there's something else you need to know. I think our meeting at the hospital wasn't a coincidence. Someone arranged for us to be in the same place. Which means they've been watching us for months, Marcus replied grimly, and they probably know about the others too. They reached a junction where the maintenance tunnel connected to the main subway line. Sarah could see lights from a train approaching in the distance. If they could reach the platform, they might be able to lose themselves in the crowd of evening commuters. But as they emerged from the tunnel onto the platform, Sarah saw more men in dark clothing positioned throughout the station. They were surrounded and there was nowhere left to run. Sarah looked at Marcus and saw the same resignation in his eyes that she felt. They had been outmaneuvered by people who knew their tactics and their hiding places. The mission files in her pocket suddenly felt very heavy. Agent Phoenix, a familiar voice called out across the platform. Agent Rodriguez, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Sarah turned toward the voice and felt her blood turn to ice. Standing near the station entrance, flanked by armed operatives, was Colonel James Crawford, their former unit commander, the man who had trained them and who had ordered them to disappear into civilian lives 5 years ago. Hello, Crawford, Sarah said, her hand moving slowly toward her weapon. I should have known. Colonel Crawford looked older than Sarah remembered, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years carrying heavy secrets. He was dressed in an expensive suit rather than military fatigues, but he still carried himself with the authority of a man who had commanded elite soldiers for decades. Sarah, Marcus, I need you to listen very carefully, Crawford said, raising his hands to show he wasn't holding a weapon. Things are not what they appear to be. Really? Sarah kept her hand near her pistol. Because it appears that our former commanding officer is hunting down his own team members with a squad of armed mercenaries. I'm trying to protect you, Crawford replied. Both of you? The people who killed Raven and took the others, they're not working for me. Marcus wheeled his chair forward slightly. Then who are they working for, Colonel? Crawford gestured to his men, who lowered their weapons but remained alert. The same people we exposed during Operation Nightfall. The ones who have spent 5 years planning their revenge. A train pulled into the station and civilian passengers began getting off and on. Crawford's team blended seamlessly into the crowd, looking like ordinary commuters despite their tactical readiness. Sarah noticed how professionally they moved. These weren't hired thugs, they were military or former military personnel. Explain, Sarah demanded, and make it fast. We've got company. Crawford looked around the station nervously. Not here. Too exposed. There's a safe house 10 minutes from here. You can ask all the questions you want once we're secure. How do we know this isn't a trap? Marcus asked. Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead, Crawford replied bluntly. I've had people watching both of you for months. I could have taken you any time. Sarah realized he was right. If Crawford had wanted to eliminate them, he wouldn't have needed this elaborate setup. He could have arranged an accident at the hospital or had them killed in their homes. The fact that they were having this conversation meant he needed them alive. The files, Sarah said. You want the mission files. I want to keep them out of the wrong hands, Crawford corrected. And I want to use them to end this before more people die. Sarah made a quick decision. Lead the way, Colonel. But if this is a setup, you'll be the first to go down. Crawford nodded and signaled to his team. They moved through the station in a coordinated pattern, with Sarah and Marcus in the center of a protective formation. To any observer, they would look like a group of friends or business associates traveling together. The safe house was a nondescript office building in the financial district. They entered through a parking garage and took a service elevator to the 15th floor. The office space had been set up as a temporary command center, with computers, communications equipment, and detailed maps covering the walls. Impressive setup, Marcus commented as he looked around. How long have you been planning this? 3 years, Crawford replied, pouring coffee from a machine in the corner. Ever since we got word that someone was asking questions about Operation Nightfall. Sarah studied the maps on the walls. They showed locations across the United States and Europe, with red X marks over several cities. Are these where the team members were located? We're being the operative phrase, Crawford said grimly. We're down to 7 confirmed survivors out of the original 12-person team. You said the people behind this are the same ones we exposed during the mission, Marcus said. But most of those arms dealers were arrested or killed. Crawford activated a large monitor and brought up a series of photographs. The dealers were small fish. The real power behind the operation was a consortium of government officials, defense contractors, and international criminal organizations. We called them the Prometheus Group. Sarah recognized some of the faces on the screen: senators, generals, CEOs of major corporations. These people had billions of dollars worth of illegal arms deals exposed because of our mission, she said. And they want revenge, Crawford confirmed. But more than that, they want to restart their operations. The mission files you and the others kept contain enough evidence to destroy all of them permanently. They need those files eliminated, and they need everyone who knows about them silenced. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Crawford a text message. I got this 2 hours ago before Sarah showed up at my apartment. The message was short. Give us the Phoenix files or join your friends. They're not being subtle anymore, Crawford observed. Which means they're getting desperate. Something has forced them to accelerate their timeline. Sarah thought about the events of the day. Rebecca Torres contacted me this morning. She's the one who told me about Raven's death. Crawford's expression darkened. Torres is dead, Sarah. She was killed in her car last night, made to look like a carjacking. Sarah felt the world tilt around her. The woman she had met at the coffee shop, the woman who had given her the communication device, wasn't Rebecca Torres. Then who did I meet today? That's what we need to find out, Crawford said. Can you describe her? Sarah provided a detailed description, while Crawford's team ran it through facial recognition software. Within minutes, they had a match. Diana Volkov, Crawford read from the computer screen. Former Russian intelligence, now works as a freelance operative. She's been hired by the Prometheus group to recover the mission files. She has one of the communication devices, Sarah said, pulling the device from her pocket. Is it compromised? Crawford's tech specialist, a young man named Davis, examined the device with electronic scanning equipment. It's broadcasting your location, he confirmed. Has been since you turned it on. They've been tracking you all day. Marcus shook his head. So they know exactly where we are right now. Actually, no. Davis held up a small electronic jamming device. This building is shielded. They lost your signal when you entered the garage, but they'll be watching all the exits. Crawford walked over to a window and peered through the blinds. We've got movement on the street. Black SUVs, probably 6 to 8 operatives per vehicle. Sarah joined him at the window. 4 black vehicles were positioned around the building, and she could see people in tactical gear setting up what looked like a perimeter. They're not taking any chances this time. Colonel, Davis called from his computer station. I'm picking up police radio chatter. Someone called in a bomb threat for this building. Emergency services are on the way. Crawford cursed under his breath. Smart. Force an evacuation, then pick us off in the confusion when everyone exits the building. How long do we have? Marcus asked. Police response time in this area is usually about 8 minutes, Davis replied. But with a bomb threat, they'll come fast and they'll come in force. Sarah looked around the room, assessing their options. They were 15 floors up with limited exits and surrounded by hostile forces. The Prometheus group had planned this carefully, using the fake Torres meeting to lure them into position, and then calling in emergency services to force them out of their defensive position. The roof, she said suddenly. Do we have helicopter extraction available? Crawford shook his head. Not without risking civilian casualties. This is downtown Chicago, not some military base. Then we fight our way out, Marcus said simply. It's what we're trained for. Against professional operators in an urban environment with police response incoming? Crawford looked skeptical. That's a suicide mission. Sarah studied the building schematics displayed on one of the monitors. Maybe not. Davis, can you access the building's fire suppression system? Probably why. If we can create enough chaos and confusion, we might be able to slip out during the evacuation. Sarah pointed to the schematics. Trigger the sprinkler system on floors 10 through 20. Set off fire alarms throughout the building. Make it look like there really is an emergency. Crawford understood immediately. Mix in with the evacuating civilians and disappear in the crowd. Exactly. But we'll need to split up. They're looking for a group, not individuals. Marcus transferred the data from his hard drive to 2 additional storage devices, giving one to Sarah and keeping one for himself. Crawford would take the 3rd copy. If any of them were captured, the others could still complete the mission. Where do we meet after we get out? Marcus asked. Crawford thought for a moment. Lincoln Park Zoo. Main entrance tomorrow at noon. If someone doesn't show, assume they've been compromised. Davis began working on the building's computer systems while Crawford's team prepared for extraction. Sarah checked her weapon and made sure she had spare ammunition. In a few minutes, they would be back in the field, operating under fire just like the old days. Sarah, Crawford said quietly as they prepared to leave, I'm sorry it came to this. I really thought you could all stay hidden forever. We both know that was never realistic, Sarah replied. Some secrets are too big to stay buried forever. The fire alarms began blaring throughout the building, and Sarah could hear the sound of sirens approaching from multiple directions. It was time to move. Remember, Crawford called out as they headed for the stairwell. Trust no one except each other. The Prometheus group has people everywhere, including law enforcement. As they began their descent through the chaos of an emergency evacuation, Sarah couldn't help but notice that after 5 years of peaceful civilian life, she felt strangely at home in the middle of a crisis. Phoenix was definitely. The stairwell filled with panicked office workers as the fire alarms continued their piercing wail. Sarah moved down the stairs with the crowd, keeping Crawford and Marcus in sight while maintaining enough distance that they wouldn't be identified as a group. The sprinkler system had activated on multiple floors, and water cascaded down the stairwell, adding to the chaos. Sarah had changed into a business jacket that one of Crawford's female operatives had provided, and she now looked like any other office worker fleeing the building. Her weapon was concealed in a briefcase, and the storage device containing the mission files was hidden in a secret compartment of her purse. By the time they reached the 5th floor, Sarah could hear radio chatter from emergency responders who had entered the building. The bomb squad would be setting up equipment to search for explosives, which would buy them some time before anyone realized the threat was fake. On the 3rd floor, Sarah noticed a man in a maintenance uniform who was moving against the flow of evacuating people. He was trying to push his way up the stairs while everyone else was going down. Something about his movement pattern triggered her training. He was too focused, too determined, and he kept checking a device in his hand that looked like a GPS tracker. Sarah spoke quietly into her collar microphone, hoping Crawford's team was still monitoring communications. Hostile operative on stairwell 3 heading up against evacuation flow. He's tracking something. Crawford's voice crackled back through her earpiece. Confirmed. We see him. Davis disabled the communication device, but they might have backup tracking methods. As they continued down, Sarah saw more suspicious individuals mixed in with the legitimate evacuees. The Prometheus group had positioned operatives throughout the building, probably entering during the initial chaos of the emergency response. They were well organized and well funded, which made them extremely dangerous. The ground floor lobby was packed with people streaming toward the exits, guided by firefighters and police officers. Sarah could see the black SUVs parked across the street, and she noticed several people with earpieces standing near the building entrances. They were watching every face in the crowd, looking for their targets. Sarah made it outside and joined a group of evacuees who were being directed to a safe area across the street. She kept her head down and tried to blend in with the office workers who were complaining about the disruption to their day. Her earpiece crackled again. "Phoenix, this is Eagle," Crawford's voice said. "I'm out and heading to Extraction Point Alpha. Rodriguez, report status." "Rodriguez here," Marcus replied. "Clear of the building, but I've got eyes on me. 2 operatives following my position." Sarah looked around carefully and spotted Marcus about 50 yards away. He was moving through the crowd in his racing wheelchair, but 2 men in dark clothing were indeed following him, trying to stay inconspicuous among the evacuees. "I see them," Sarah said, moving to assist. Sarah began working her way through the crowd toward Marcus's position. She needed to create a distraction that would allow him to escape without revealing her own location to the watchers. As she moved, she noticed a news crew setting up cameras to film the emergency response. That gave her an idea. She approached a reporter who was preparing to go live with a story about the bomb threat. "Excuse me," Sarah said, adopting the concerned tone of a worried office worker. "I think I saw someone suspicious in the building right before the alarms went off. A man with a backpack who seemed nervous." The reporter's eyes lit up with interest. "Can you describe him? Would you be willing to go on camera?" "I'm not sure about being on camera, but I think he went that way." Sarah pointed in the direction of the 2 men following Marcus. "Maybe your camera operator could get some footage of the area." The news crew immediately began moving toward the location Sarah had indicated, drawing attention and creating commotion. The 2 operatives following Marcus found themselves inadvertently caught in camera shots as the reporter tried to follow up on Sarah's tip. Rather than risk exposure on live television, they backed away from Marcus and melted into the crowd. "Rodriguez, you're clear," Sarah reported. "Suggest you move to Extraction Point Beta immediately." "Copy that. Thanks for the assist." Sarah was about to make her own exit when she felt someone grab her arm. She turned to see a Chicago police officer, but something about his grip and his positioning told her he wasn't what he appeared to be. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about what you saw inside the building," the fake officer said. His partner moved to block her other side, effectively trapping her between them. "Of course, officer," Sarah replied calmly. "But shouldn't we move away from the crowd?" "I can give you more details privately." The 2 men began guiding her toward one of the black SUVs. Sarah went along cooperatively, appearing to be an innocent witness being questioned by police. But as they reached the vehicle, she noticed that neither man had proper police identification visible, and the SUV had no official markings despite looking like an unmarked police car. "Actually, officers, I'd like to see your badges before we continue," Sarah said. Stopping suddenly, the man holding her arm tightened his grip. "Just get in the vehicle, ma'am. We'll sort out the details downtown." That confirmed what Sarah already suspected. These weren't police officers at all. They were Prometheus Group operatives, who had been watching the evacuation for their targets. She had walked right into their trap while trying to help Marcus escape. Sarah let her body go limp suddenly, forcing the fake officers to support her full weight. As they struggled to keep her upright, she drove her elbow back into the ribs of the man on her left while simultaneously stomping down hard on the instep of the man on her right. Both men released their grip reflexively, and Sarah rolled away from them toward the cover of a parked car. "Phoenix is compromised," she said into her microphone as she drew her weapon from the briefcase. Engaging hostiles at the primary evacuation zone. The situation escalated quickly. The two fake officers drew their own weapons, and Sarah heard Crawford's voice in her earpiece calling for immediate backup. Real police officers who were managing the evacuation began responding to the sound of gunfire, adding to the confusion. Sarah used the parked cars as cover while she assessed her options. She could see more black SUVs moving into position around the perimeter, and she realized that the Prometheus group had essentially turned the entire emergency response into a trap. They had probably been planning this contingency from the moment they learned about the building where Crawford's team was operating. "All stations, this is Eagle." Crawford's voice came through clearly. "Operation Nightfall is officially reactivated. Phoenix, can you reach Extraction Point Gamma?" Extraction Point Gamma was the subway station where they had been captured earlier. It seemed like a strange choice until Sarah realized that Crawford probably had backup plans positioned throughout the city. The fact that he was sending her back to a location that had been compromised suggested that his team had cleared it or set up an ambush of their own. "Negative on Gamma," Sarah replied as she moved between parked cars toward the street. "Too many hostiles between my position and target. Requesting alternate extraction." "Stand by," Crawford responded. "Davis, what's the status on our aerial support?" Sarah heard helicopter rotors approaching and looked up to see a news helicopter circling the scene. But as it came closer, she noticed it was flying in a very specific pattern, one that would provide cover for an extraction if someone could reach the roof of a nearby building. "Phoenix, see the helicopter?" Crawford asked. "That's our ride. Building to your north, fire escape on the east side. Can you reach it?" Sarah looked at the building Crawford was referring to. It was about 2 blocks away, and she would have to cross several streets that were now crawling with both legitimate emergency responders and hostile operatives. But it was her best chance of escape. "Copy that. Moving to Extraction Point Delta now." Sarah holstered her weapon and began moving through the crowd like a panicked evacuee fleeing the scene. She had learned long ago that the best way to become invisible was to act exactly like everyone else around you. As she reached the edge of the emergency perimeter, she broke into a run along with several other people who were trying to get as far away from the building as possible. The 2 blocks to the extraction building felt like 2 miles. Sarah had to cross 3 intersections where she was visible to the operatives in the SUVs, and she could see them communicating with each other as they tried to track her movement. At one point, she ducked into a coffee shop and exited through the back door into an alley, using the building to break their line of sight. When she reached the building with the fire escape, Sarah found the east side and began climbing as quickly as possible. The metal stairs rang under her feet, and she hoped the sound wouldn't carry over the noise of the emergency response behind her. As she reached the roof, the helicopter was already hovering nearby. Sarah could see Crawford in the passenger seat, and Davis was operating what appeared to be sophisticated communication equipment from the back of the aircraft. The helicopter touched down just long enough for Sarah to climb aboard, then immediately lifted off and headed west over the city. As they gained altitude, Sarah could see the full scope of the Prometheus group's operation spread out below them. There were at least a dozen vehicles positioned around the building, and she could see teams of operatives searching the surrounding area. "Status report," Crawford said as he handed Sarah a headset. "Marcus made it out safely, I assume?" "Confirmed. He's en route to a secure location." Crawford looked grim. "But we lost 2 of my team members in the building. The Prometheus group was better prepared than we anticipated." Sarah felt a stab of guilt. Good people had died because she and Marcus had walked into a trap. "What's our next move?" "We use the mission files to go on the offensive," Crawford replied. "We've been playing defense for too long. It's time to start taking down the people responsible for this." Davis looked up from his equipment. "Colonel, we're getting reports of similar operations in Miami and Seattle. They're moving against all the remaining team members simultaneously." Crawford's expression darkened further. "Then we're out of time. Sarah, I hope you're ready to become Phoenix again, because we're about to declare war on some very powerful people. As the helicopter flew toward their destination, Sarah looked down at the city below and thought about her quiet life at the VA hospital. That life was over now, probably forever. But looking at Crawford and remembering her fallen teammates, she realized that some fights were worth the sacrifice. Phoenix was fully reactivated, and this time she was going to make sure the Prometheus group regretted ever coming after her team. The helicopter landed at a private airfield 40 miles outside Chicago. Sarah could see a small jet waiting on the tarmac, its engines already running. Crawford's operation was more extensive than she had realized. He had resources and personnel positioned across multiple states, all working to protect the surviving members of their old unit. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked as they transferred from the helicopter to the jet. "Washington, D.C., Crawford replied. "It's time to take this fight directly to the source." Davis handed Sarah a tablet containing detailed files on the Prometheus group's leadership. "We've spent 3 years building this intelligence package," he explained. "Names, addresses, financial records, communication intercepts. Everything we need to expose their operations." Sarah scrolled through the files as the jet taxied for takeoff. The conspiracy was even larger than she had imagined during Operation Nightfall. The Prometheus group included 2 sitting senators, a deputy secretary of defense, the CEO of a major arms manufacturer, and at least 6 other high-ranking officials in various government agencies. "How did they stay hidden for so long?" Sarah asked. "Money and power," Crawford said simply. "They had enough of both to cover their tracks and eliminate anyone who got too close to the truth. Until our team exposed their arms-dealing operation 5 years ago." The jet lifted off into the evening sky, and Sarah watched the lights of Chicago disappear below them. She thought about Marcus, hoping he had reached safety, and about her patients at the VA hospital, who would wonder why she had suddenly disappeared from their lives. "Crawford, I need you to promise me something," Sarah said. "After we finish this, after the Prometheus group is exposed and stopped, I want guarantees that the surviving team members can go back to their civilian lives safely." Crawford looked at her seriously. "Sarah, after what we're about to do, there may not be any going back. We're about to take on some of the most powerful people in the country. They'll use every resource they have to destroy us. Then we better make sure we have enough evidence to destroy them first," Sarah replied. Davis looked up from his computer. "I'm getting updates from our teams in Miami and Seattle. The operations against Santos and Thompson were successful. Both men are now in protective custody. But we lost contact with Wilson about 2 hours ago." Sarah remembered Agent Wilson, Thomas Wilson, their communications specialist. He had been in witness protection after testifying in an unrelated case. If the Prometheus group had found him despite federal protection, it meant they had sources inside the U.S. Marshal Service as well. "What about Chen?" Sarah asked. David Chen had been their technology expert, the one who had originally discovered the Prometheus group's financial networks during Operation Nightfall. "That's where we're headed," Crawford said. "Chen isn't missing. He's been working with us for the past year. He's the one who built most of our intelligence network and tracking systems." The jet began its descent toward Reagan National Airport as Crawford briefed Sarah on their plan. Chen had been working out of a secure facility in Virginia, using his skills to penetrate the Prometheus group's computer networks and gather evidence of their current operations. But recent events had forced them to accelerate their timeline. "We have a narrow window," Crawford explained. "The Prometheus group knows we have the mission files, and they know we're actively working against them. They'll be scrambling to cover their tracks and eliminate any evidence of their activities. So we hit them before they can finish cleaning house." Sarah understood. "Release everything we have and force them into the open." "Exactly. But it has to be done right. If we just dump the files online, they'll claim it's foreign disinformation or terrorist propaganda. We need to present the evidence through legitimate channels that can't be discredited." The jet landed smoothly, and they were met by a small team of operatives who looked like they could be Secret Service agents. Sarah noticed that Crawford's organization had grown considerably since the old days. He now commanded resources that rivaled those of a small intelligence agency. The secure facility was located in an industrial complex that appeared to house various technology companies. Their destination was labeled Advanced Data Solutions and looked completely ordinary from the outside. But once they passed through multiple security checkpoints, Sarah found herself in a sophisticated operations center that would have impressed the NSA. David Chen looked up from a bank of computer monitors as they entered. He was older and thinner than Sarah remembered, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a college professor than a former Black Ops agent. "Phoenix," Chen said with a genuine smile. "It's good to see you again, even under these circumstances." "David, I heard you've been busy since we disbanded. You could say that." Chen gestured to the screens around him. "I've been tracking the Prometheus Group's activities for 3 years. Financial transactions, communication patterns, travel records. They've been rebuilding their arms dealing network, but this time they're being much more careful about operational security." Sarah studied the data displayed on Chen's monitors. The Prometheus Group had learned from their previous exposure and had implemented sophisticated counter-surveillance measures. But Chen had found ways to penetrate their defenses using techniques that were years ahead of anything the government was currently using. "What's our current status?" Crawford asked. "Not good," Chen replied. "They've accelerated their timeline significantly since yesterday. I'm seeing massive financial transfers, emergency communications, and what appears to be preparation for a major operation." "What kind of operation?" Chen brought up a series of intercepts on his main screen. "Based on the communication patterns and resource allocation, I believe they're planning to eliminate all remaining evidence of their activities, including anyone who might testify against them." Sarah felt a chill. "They're planning to kill off everyone who knows about Operation Nightfall, not just the team members." "That's my assessment," Chen confirmed. "Judges who handled related cases, prosecutors who worked on arms trafficking investigations, even some of their own people who might be tempted to cooperate with authorities." Crawford studied the data grimly. "How long do we have?" "Based on the preparation timeline, probably less than 24 hours before they start eliminating witnesses." Sarah looked around the operations center at the small team of people who were working to prevent a massacre. "What do we need to do to stop them?" Chen pulled up another screen showing a complex network diagram. "We need to release all the evidence simultaneously through multiple channels. Major news organizations, congressional oversight committees, international criminal courts, and law enforcement agencies in several countries. If we can create enough exposure quickly enough, it becomes impossible for them to cover up or discredit." "What about protecting the witnesses?" Sarah asked. "We have teams standing by to provide security for the most critical targets," Crawford said. "But we can't protect everyone. The best defense is to expose the Prometheus Group completely before they can act." Davis approached with a secure phone. "Colonel, we have an urgent call from Agent Rodriguez." Crawford took the phone and spoke briefly before hanging up with a concerned expression. "Marcus has new information. He's discovered that the Prometheus Group has been monitoring all of our communications, including this conversation." Sarah felt the familiar sensation of walking into a trap. "How long have they been listening?" "Unknown, but we have to assume they know everything about our current location and plans." Crawford began giving orders to his team. "Initiate emergency relocation protocols. We have 15 minutes to evacuate this facility." Chen was already copying critical data to portable storage devices, while other team members began shutting down equipment. Sarah helped carry essential files while keeping watch on the security monitors that showed the area around the building. "There," Sarah pointed to one of the monitors. "Black SUVs approaching from the north entrance." Crawford looked at the screen and counted vehicles. At least 4 teams, probably 6 operatives each. They're not taking any chances this time. "Alternate exit routes?" Sarah asked. 2, Crawford replied. "Underground tunnel to the adjacent building, or helicopter extraction from the roof. But if they're monitoring our communications, they'll know about both options." Chen finished copying the last of the files and destroyed the computer hard drives with a powerful electromagnet. "Everything's backed up and ready for transmission. We just need internet access and about 30 minutes to upload to all the designated recipients." "Then that's what we'll give you," Sarah said, checking her weapon. "Crawford, get Chen to a location where he can complete the upload. I'll buy you time." "Negative," Crawford replied. "We stick together." Sarah looked at the security monitors again. The Prometheus Group operatives were positioning themselves around all the building exits, just as they had done at the office building earlier. But this time Sarah had an advantage. She knew the building layout and had time to prepare. "David, how long to upload everything?" 28 minutes minimum, Chen replied. Sarah thought quickly. Here's what we're going to do. Chen uploads the files from the roof while Crawford's team provides security. I'll create enough chaos on the ground level to keep their attention focused away from the roof. That's suicide, Crawford protested. No, it's what I'm trained for, Sarah replied. Phoenix rises from impossible situations, remember? Besides, if we all try to escape together, we'll all get captured or killed. This way, at least the mission gets completed. Crawford knew she was right even though he hated the plan. What do you need? Access to the building's security system, all available ammunition and anything that makes noise and creates confusion. Sarah was already moving toward the security station. And Crawford, when Chen finishes that upload, you make sure those files reach every news organization and government agency on your list. Don't wait for me. Chen looked up from his equipment. Sarah, there's something else you need to know. The Prometheus group isn't just trying to cover up their arms dealing. They're planning something much bigger. A terrorist attack they're going to blame on foreign agents. The attack is scheduled for tomorrow morning at the Capitol building. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. How many casualties? Based on the intelligence I've gathered, potentially hundreds of government officials, including most of the congressional leadership. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. The Prometheus group wasn't just covering their tracks. They were planning to eliminate the entire government structure that might investigate them, then rebuild it with people under their control. All the more reason to make sure those files get uploaded, Sarah said grimly. Go. I'll handle the welcoming committee downstairs. As Crawford's team headed for the roof with Chen and his equipment, Sarah began preparing for what might be her final mission. She had 30 minutes to hold off professional operatives who outnumbered her 6-1. In a building they had surrounded, while protecting the upload that would expose the biggest conspiracy in American history. Phoenix had risen from impossible situations before, but this time even she wasn't sure she could survive what was coming. Sarah activated the building's fire suppression system and began turning off lights throughout the structure. In 30 minutes, the world would know the truth about the Prometheus group. She just had to make sure she lived long enough to see it happen. The first explosive charges went off on the ground floor as the enemy teams began their assault. Sarah smiled grimly and checked her ammunition one final time. It was going to be a very long 30 minutes.